Welcome back to Tank Guide Life. If you're joining us today, chances are you might be going through one of the tougher moments in fish keeping.
Yeah.
Maybe you're staring at your tank right now and you see those little white spots, or a fin that looked perfect yesterday is suddenly frayed. That feeling in your stomach, that gut punch of worry, it's real. And it's completely understandable.
And that worry, it so often turns into guilt almost immediately. And that's really the first thing we want to tackle today.
Right.
We're going to try to help you move past that initial panic, that feeling of what do I do, and get to a calm, planned, and, well, a science-based response.
And before we get into the analysis, we do have a necessary announcement. You are listening to the Tank Guide Life podcast, a product of Fish Keeping Life Co.
So, as we said, that wave of guilt it's almost a default reaction for hobbyists, isn't it? The first thought is, I failed. I did something wrong.
Oh, absolutely. What did I miss?
Exactly. And while responsibility is key, we really want to shift your perspective right from the start.
Yes. The very first thing everyone listening needs to hear and really internalize is this. Seeing a sick fish is not automatically a failure on your part.
It's not. Understanding the context here is, it's just vital for managing your own stress so you can actually treat the problem effectively.
So what is that context?
Well, think about the journey a fish takes before it ever even sees your home. When you get a new fish, you get zero medical history. None.
Right. No chart, no background.
You don't know its genetics, the water it was raised in, or, and this is the most critical part, the intense physiological stress it went through during shipping.
From the breeder to a distributor to the store?
Exactly. All that transport and handling, that stress suppresses the immune system long before the fish is even in your beautifully prepared tank.
So we're often starting with an immune system that's already, running on fumes.
That's a perfect way to put it. Yeah. A low-grade parasite or some common bacteria that a totally healthy, unstressed fish could just shrug off.
It suddenly becomes a huge problem.
A life-threatening illness for an animal that is just biologically exhausted from its journey.
Okay, so that's the pivot point.
That's it. We can't control what happened before they got to us. But our control begins the moment that fish is in our care.
And from then on, the focus shifts completely.
Entirely. To providing an environment that is so stable, so pristine, that the fish's immune system has the best possible chance to recover and fight back on its own.
And what does that ideal control look like in practice? What are we talking about?
We're talking about maintaining consistently stable water parameters, making sure temperatures are steady, minimizing social stress, avoiding aggression and overcrowding.
Just making every decision with the fish's welfare as the North Star.
The absolute guiding principle. And look, if you're investing your time to learn this stuff, these scientifically sound methods, you're already showing that high level of responsibility.
And that's really the mission of Tank Guide Life. To guide you from that confusion and panic to confidence, all based on real-world testing and the resources we have on the tankguide.com. So let's start at the beginning, at the root causes.
Okay, let's unpack this core truth then. Disease doesn't just appear out of nowhere in a perfect tank.
No, it really doesn't.
It has to exploit a weakness that's already there. So fundamentally, most of these outbreaks are about stress and system instability.
That is the absolute cornerstone of freshwater fish health. The vast majority of common ailments, be it parasitic, bacterial, fungal, they're all opportunistic.
They need an opening.
They require compromised hosts. They're just sort of waiting for those environmental pressures to weaken a fish's natural defenses, its mucus coat, its internal systems, to a point where it just can't cope anymore. The fish was overwhelmed because the environment became unstable.
Which is actually, in a way, good news, because if we know what those common environmental triggers are, we can try to get ahead of them.
Okay.
So what are the big ones that really compromise the immune system? Well, we can start with the subtle physical stressors. Sudden temperature swings, even small ones, they're incredibly taxing.
You mean like during a water change?
Exactly. You do a water change with water that's 5, 6, 7 degrees different than the tank water. That quick shift, it shocks the fish's system. It forces it to redirect energy away from immune function just to stay stable.
And then there are the more chronic, ongoing things like social aggression, bad tank mates.
Right. That continuous low-grade fight-or-flight response, it keeps cortisol levels, the stress hormone, just constantly high.
And that's just draining the battery over time.
Precisely. If a fish is constantly being harassed or is always hiding, it's under chronic stress. Its immune system is basically running on empty all the time.
So a pathogen that a happy fish would just ignore?
Suddenly becomes a life-threatening illness. The fish just doesn't have the biological resources left to fight it off.
Which brings us to the third, and maybe the most common culprit of all, instability in the water chemistry.
Spikes.
We're talking ammonia and nitrite.
That instability is the #1 way a fish's immune system gets compromised, especially in a new tank during that initial cycling phase.
And this isn't just stress, it's actual physical damage, right?
It is. Toxic ammonia and nitrate don't just stress the fish, they physically burn the delicate gill tissues. That prevents proper oxygen uptake, it causes permanent damage, and it leaves the fish completely defenseless against anything else in the water.
People call it new tank syndrome, but it can happen anytime the biological filter gets disrupted.
Anytime. And this all highlights this unique problem we have with aquariums. It's something we sometimes forget.
The closed system problem.
Yes. In a river or a lake, pathogens are diluted. They're dispersed by enormous volumes of moving water, but in a tank, the water is finite. It's a closed box.
So once a pathogen gets in,
It multiplies rapidly. And this enclosed environment ensures that every single animal in that box is constantly exposed to a rapidly increasing concentrated load of that pathogen.
which is why when one fish gets sick, you have to assume.
You have to assume the disease is circulating everywhere, in the water, in the substrate, because most of the time it is.
This means prevention really is the most powerful tool we have. So let's connect this back to some of the tools on the site because they directly address these stressors.
Let's do it. Let's start with the social stress we just mentioned. The aggression, the fin nipping, overcrowding. Where does that come from?
Bad planning.
Usually poor planning or just not realizing the bioload capacity of your tank.
And that's exactly where something like the stocking advisor comes in. It's designed specifically to head off those long-term stressors.
It really is. It acts as your community planner. The stocking advisor helps you build a balanced community by checking things like bioload and temperament compatibility before you ever buy the fish.
So you're reducing a massive source of chronic stress from day one.
You are. You're preventing the immune system from being suppressed over months and months of low-grade warfare in the tank.
And then there's the chemical stress, the ammonia and nitrite. This is the part that I think confuses a lot of new hobbyists.
Oh, it's intimidating. That initial nitrogen cycle is daunting. But you have to understand, the health of your biological filter is the health of your fish's immune system.
If the filter is failing,
Your fish is fighting toxic waste 24/7. And that's why the cycling coach becomes really non-negotiable for getting that foundational stability right.
how does the cycling coach specifically help with disease prevention?
It just simplifies that critical, confusing first step, the nitrogen cycle. It gives you clear, step-by-step guidance.
It tells you what to do and when.
Exactly. It makes sure those beneficial bacteria are robustly established before the fish are even in there. Or it guides you safely through a fission cycle, which needs much more rigorous testing and water changes.
And the goal is always the same.
Always 0 ppm ammonia, 0 ppm nitrite. If you start with chemically stable water, you are giving your fish the strongest possible foundation for their immune system to thrive. Prevention, in this case, is just pure, uncompromised stability.
So we establish a stable, balanced community with the stocking advisor. We make sure the water is safe with the cycling coach. That alone is going to fend off most opportunistic illnesses.
It will.
But what happens when, despite all our best efforts, that foundation is breached and we see those dreaded little white spots? That brings us to section 2, the nemesis of pretty much every freshwater hobbyist at some point, H,
White spot disease.
caused by the parasite Ichthyophthirius multifiliis.
Yeah, and itch is incredibly common. It often hitchhikes in on new fish, sometimes even on plants, but it is also one of the most misunderstood and, frankly, poorly treated diseases because people don't grasp its life cycle.
Okay, let's nail down the diagnosis first. What are we looking for, besides just the obvious spots?
So you're looking for those distinct, small, salt-like white spots. They look like someone sprinkled table salt all over the fish's body and fins. Those are the visible parasites, the trophantes, feeding.
But there are behavioral signs too, right? Sometimes they come first.
They do. In the early stages, you might see the fish flashing.
The scratching.
Exactly. They'll scratch or rub themselves rapidly against the decor, rocks, the substrate. They're desperately trying to dislodge this irritating parasite that's burrowing into their skin.
You might also see them being lethargic, or their fins are clamped close to their belly.
Labored breathing, hanging out near the surface, or right by the filter outlet where the oxygen levels are a bit higher.
Okay, Here's the most critical takeaway about itch. And this is something that sets it apart from almost every other disease we're going to talk about today.
This is the big one.
You must treat the entire system, not just the fish that has spots.
This is non-negotiable. If you see spots on one fish, the parasite is already cycling through the entire aquarium. The water, the substrate, everything.
So if you just pull out the one sick fish,
You're leaving behind a ticking time bomb. You're leaving hundreds, maybe thousands of infectious cysts in the main tank, ready to reinfect all the other fish or the original fish as soon as it goes back in.
let's spend a minute on why that is. Let's break down that life cycle.
It has three main stages. Stage 1 is the trophont. That's the parasitic stage we see as the white spot. It's on the fish feeding.
Yeah.
Stage 2 is the tomont. When that trophont matures, it drops off the fish and it forms a protective cyst. It usually falls into the substrate or hides in the decor.
And this cyst is the real problem,
This cyst is the problem. It is extremely resistant to medication.
like a little armored shell.
It is. And inside that shell, the parasite multiplies like crazy. Eventually, the cyst bursts open and it releases hundreds of tiny, free-swimming parasites. These are the theronts.
And that's stage 3.
That's stage 3. And these theronts, they have to find a host, a fish, within a pretty short window, usually 48 to 72 hours, or they die.
So our job as the fish keeper is to kill those free-swimming theronts before they can find a fish.
That is the entire game, intercepting them in that vulnerable free-swimming stage.
Which is why medication, a standard over-the-counter product like ECX, which has formalin and malachite green, why it works. It kills those theronts.
It is absolutely effective, and it's essential in severe, fast-moving cases, no question. But we always have to think about the collateral damage.
What do you mean?
Well, those are strong chemicals. They affect the entire ecosystem. They can harm sensitive invertebrates like shrimp or snails, and crucially, they can damage your beneficial bacteria.
The very engine of stability we were just talking about.
Exactly. So if the conditions allow, and by that I mean the infection is caught pretty early and the fish are generally still strong, many of us, including us at TTG, prefer to try a biology-based approach first.
And that is the natural-ish treatment method. Basically, heat plus water changes.
It's a really intelligent approach because it uses the parasite's own biology, its temperature sensitivity, against it, without harsh chemicals.
Okay, let's break down the steps because you have to do this carefully, starting with the temperature.
Absolutely. Do not rush this. A sudden temperature shock is a massive stressor.
The opposite of what we want.
The complete opposite. You need to raise the temperature gradually, no more than maybe 2 degrees Fahrenheit per hour over a 24 to 48 hour period.
And what's the target?
The target range is about 82 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 28 to 30 Celsius. But, and this is important, you have to research your specific fish.
Right.
Cold water fish, like goldfish or some sensitive high-altitude tetras, they can't handle the upper end of that range. You have to know your species' tolerance.
And the why behind the heat is the key insight. We're not cooking the parasite.
No, you're not trying to kill it directly with heat. You are using the heat to accelerate its life cycle.
You're speeding it up.
You're speeding it all up. Elevated temperatures force those trophonts to mature and drop off the fish much, much faster. This drastically reduces the time the parasite has to feed and reproduce, and it pushes the entire population into that vulnerable, free-swimming, the errant stage much more quickly.
But as soon as that temperature starts going up, there is a critical welfare step you have to take immediately.
The aeration rule. This is so important. Warmer water holds significantly less dissolved oxygen.
And the fish are already stressed. They're already fighting an infection, probably breathing heavily.
So they need more oxygen, not less. You must increase surface agitation. The easiest way is to add an air stone. Or adjust your filter outlet so it creates a really strong ripple on the surface. If you don't do this, you can literally suffocate your fish in the warm water.
Okay, now expectation management.
Yeah.
Because this process can cause a lot of anxiety for people doing it the first time, the tank often looks worse before it gets better.
Yes. This is so counterintuitive, but it's true. You might see a sudden explosion of new white spots right after you raise the temperature.
Which would make me panic. I think I'm making it worse.
And everyone does. But it's a sign that the treatment is working exactly as it's supposed to. You are successfully forcing all the hidden parasites into their visible, mature stage, getting them off the fish so you can deal with them. Do not panic. It means you're winning.
Which sets up the final, most critical part of the whole thing, the active intervention.
Frequent, consistent water changes. This is your physical weapon against X. If you can manage it, you should perform a 25% to 50% water change every single day.
And that water has to be temperature matched and dechlorinated.
Always. The goal here is twofold. One, you're maintaining pristine water quality to support the fish's immune system. And two, you are physically vacuuming out the substrate to remove the infectious cysts and the free-swimming Ichthyophthirius that have been released into the water.
So that's the 1-2 punch. Heat forces them out, water changes remove them.
That's the core of the biological treatment. But you cannot stop when the spots are gone. This is where so many people go wrong.
This is why itch comes back.
This is the #1 reason for itch recurrence. You must maintain the full routine, the heat, and the daily water changes for at least 7 to 10 days after you see the last visible spot disappear.
Because even if you can't see them, they're still in there.
They're still in that invisible protective cyst stage in your substrate. Stopping early just ensures that those hidden cysts will eventually burst and start the whole horrible cycle all over again. You have to keep it going to catch those final newly hatched generations of the rods.
Okay, so that incredibly detailed protocol, that's specifically for itch. It's the exception to the rule because it's so contagious and system-wide.
It really is.
What about everything else? When do we shift our strategy from treating the entire system to isolating the individual sick fish?
For the vast majority of other freshwater diseases, especially bacterial, fungal, or localized infections, isolation in a hospital tank is absolutely the preferred method.
Why is that? What does it accomplish?
It achieves 3 critical goals. 1, it obviously prevents contagion to the other fish. 2, it prevents healthy fish from being exposed to chemicals they don't need. And 3, and this is so important, it protects your main biological filter from being damaged or destroyed by strong medications like antibiotics.
So we've got a rule of thumb, which means whole tank treatment. Pretty much everything else, isolation comes first.
That's the starting point.
Okay, let's run through some of the other common ailments then. Focus on what they look like and what the first action step should be. Let's start with fin rot.
Fin rot is usually a bacterial issue. It's often caused by bacteria like Aeromonas or Pseudomonas, and it starts right at the edges of the fins. They'll look ragged or white or sometimes even a bit bloody.
And if you don't treat it,
it just progresses. It eats away at the fin until it reaches the base of the body, and at that point, it can be fatal.
You mentioned earlier that in the early stages, the solution can be surprisingly simple.
It can, because fin rot is overwhelmingly tied to chronic stress and poor water quality. High nitrates, a little bit of chronic ammonia, poor oxygen. So the very first action should always be a major water quality correction.
Just clean water.
Pristine water. Get your ammonia and nitrate to 0. Often, if you catch it early, just stabilizing the water is enough for the fish's immune system to overcome it, and the fins will literally start regrowing on their own.
But if that doesn't work, if it's a more advanced case?
If the water correction doesn't stop the progression in, say, 48 to 72 hours, or if the infection has already reached the fin base, it's become systemic, it's aggressive.
Time to escalate.
At that point, the fish has to be moved to a hospital tank for a targeted antibiotic treatment. Waiting too long is what turns a minor issue into a systemic killer.
Okay, moving on from bacteria, let's talk about the fuzzy stuff. Fungal infections.
Right. Fungus usually appears as white or grayish, sometimes kind of greenish, cotton wool-like patches on the body or fins.
And the key thing to know here is that fungus is almost always secondary.
Almost always. It's opportunistic, it doesn't attack healthy tissue, it only gets a foothold after the fish has had a physical injury like a scrape, or a bacterial infection that broke the skin, or just severe prolonged stress.
So when you see fungus, you're not just treating the fungus, you're looking for the root cause.
Exactly. You treat it with an antifungal medication in an isolation tank, sure, but for long-term recovery, you have to fix the underlying problem. Improve the water quality, stop the bullying, whatever it was that gave the fungus its opening.
Now, there's one infection that gets mistaken for fungus all the time, but it's way more deadly. Columnaris.
Columnaris, yeah. It's caused by the bacterium Flavobacterium columnar, and it's a deceptive killer. It sometimes looks a little fuzzy, which is why people misdiagnose it.
So what are the real signs?
It's often called cottonmouth disease because it can target the mouth, causing it to look like it's eroding or covered in cotton. In other fish, you look for these very distinctive, fast-moving, and often deadly saddle-shaped lesions on the back, right behind the dorsal fin.
And why is getting this diagnosis right so important?
Speed. It's highly virulent, and it acts fast, especially in warmer water. Unlike a slow-moving fin rot, Columnaris can kill a fish in 24 to 72 hours. So it's immediate isolation and rapid deployment of the right antibiotics. Some people will even use a salt dip initially to slow the bacteria down while they're getting the hospital tank ready for a full antibiotic course. Speed is everything with Calamaris.
And finally, let's touch on the one that probably causes the most fear, dropsy.
Dropsy is. It's the most heartbreaking diagnosis.
Mm.
And it's absolutely crucial to understand that it is a symptom. It's not a primary disease.
It's a sign of something else.
It is the visible external sign of severe internal organ failure, almost always the kidneys or the liver. And that failure results in a massive buildup of fluid inside the body cavity.
And the telltale symptom is the pine coning.
Correct. The body swells up so much that the fluid pressure forces the scales to stick straight out like a pine cone. By the time you can see that, the underlying damage is usually extensive and, frankly, irreversible.
The kidneys have failed.
They've failed. The organs responsible for managing salt and water balance have shut down, and the causes can be anything from a chronic bacterial infection to long-term exposure to bad water, or sometimes just genetic weakness.
That sounds grim. It's suggested by the time we see the pine coning, it's already too late for an easy fix.
Unfortunately, once dropsy is visible, the prognosis is very, very poor. You can try isolation and broad-spectrum antibiotics, but the conversation really has to shift immediately to the fish's quality of life and the ethics of preventing prolonged suffering.
Okay, so that's a lot of diseases that require isolation. Let's talk about the practical side. How do we actually set up and use a hospital or quarantine tank, the HTQT?
The HTQT is probably the most valuable piece of equipment you can own. It's for targeted treatment, yes, but it's also essential for quarantine.
For new fish?
For all new fish. You observe them in the QT for several weeks before they ever meet your main community. That's how you catch itch or fin rot before they can spread.
And the nice thing is, a hospital tank setup is incredibly simple. It doesn't need to be fancy.
Simplicity is the whole point. A small tank, maybe 5 to 10 gallons, which makes dosing medication really easy and precise. It needs a dedicated heater and a thermometer. And critically, it must have a bare bottom.
No gravel, no sand.
No substrate. That means no hiding places for cysts, no medication getting trapped in the gravel, and no place for uneaten food to rot and foul the water.
And for filtration.
A simple, air-driven sponge filter is perfect. And here's a pro tip. If you can, keep a spare sponge filter running in your main tank sump or just tucked in a corner.
So it's always seeded with beneficial bacteria.
Exactly. Then if you need a hospital tank, you just move that seeded sponge over and you have an instantly cycled filter. No ammonia spikes in the small tank.
But we should acknowledge, moving a fish is stressful. It's a trade-off.
It is a calculated risk. For a slow-moving, non-contagious issue like a fungal patch or a mild case of fin rot, the benefit of targeted treatment far outweighs the temporary stress of the move.
But there are times you shouldn't move them.
Yes. If a fish is already extremely weak, if it's struggling to breathe, if it's severely compromised, the stress of being netted and moved might be the final straw. You have to weigh the chances of survival during the transfer against the benefits of the isolation. It's a judgment call.
Okay, moving into our overall treatment philosophy. Whether we're treating the whole tank for itch or an isolated fish, the approach should always begin with the basics.
Yeah.
With supportive care.
Yes. Medication should be the tool you reach for when you need it, not the first reaction to every little thing.
So what does that supportive care look like?
It's the foundation. The core of fish welfare and recovery is consistency and biological support. It's a well-rounded, species-appropriate diet, high-quality foods, it's consistent feeding schedules, and looping all the way back to the beginning, it's pristine water stability.
So a proper setup and a good routine, that's already 80% of the battle.
Sometimes it's more than that. The principles from the cycling coach, testing your water, keeping ammonia and nitrite at 0, stable pH, stable temp, that matters infinitely more than any fancy additive you can buy.
What about things like garlic or vitamins?
They can be supportive. Garlic can help boost appetite if the fish is still eating. Vitamins can help, but they are completely secondary. They can never, ever replace a stable environment. A fish cannot heal in toxic water, period.
So when we do determine that medication is necessary, we need to approach it thoughtfully, like a surgical tool.
That's a great way to put it. It's powerful, but it comes with consequences. And this is an area where people often make mistakes.
How so?
Medication carries a significant metabolic cost for the fish. Their liver, their kidneys, they have to process these heavy chemicals. It's a tool for a specific need, delivered a specific way. It's not a preventative thing you just dump in the tank.
Overtreating can be just as bad as the disease itself.
It absolutely can.
Okay, so you're at the store, you're looking at this wall of different medications. How does the average person choose the right one without just guessing?
You have to become a label reader. You just have to. You need to look for the active ingredients and understand what they target.
The different categories.
Right. You've got your antiparasitics. They'll have copper, malachite green, formalin for things like ick. You have antibiotics, erythromycin, furan-based drugs for bacterial issues like Finrod or columnaris. And then you have antifungals.
And using the wrong one is pointless.
It's worse than pointless. Using a bacterial treatment for a parasite does nothing for the parasite, and it just adds unnecessary chemical stress to an already sick fish.
What about the temptation to mix them? The fish looks really bad, you're panicking, you just want to hit it with everything you've got.
That temptation has to be resisted. For the fish's sake, we really have to emphasize the dangers of mixing medications.
You're compounding the stress.
You're dramatically compounding the metabolic stress on the fish's organs. And worse, you can have unknown, unpredictable chemical reactions in the water. Some medications just don't play well together. You have to stick to one treatment at the proper dosage, monitor it, and only switch if it fails after a full course.
This leads to another point, which is a little counterintuitive. The idea that stronger is always better.
Right. People think if a little is good, a lot must be better. That's so dangerous. The goal is effective treatment at the proper dosage, based on the manufacturer's instructions for your water volume.
Doubling the dose doesn't double the cure.
It just maximizes the risk of collateral damage to the fish's internal organs. Consistency, correct diagnosis, and perfect adherence to the dosage are so much more important than just dumping in more chemicals.
And finally, there is one critical technical step you have to take before you start any chemical treatment.
Yes. You must remove your active carbon filtration.
This is such a common mistake.
It's a huge failure point in treatment. Active carbon is designed to absorb chemicals. That's its job. If you leave it in your filter while you're medicating,
It just sucks up all the medicine.
instantly, within hours, often, it renders your carefully measured dose completely ineffective. You're basically just paying to treat your carbon filter instead of your fish.
So take the carbon out, replace it with some extra filter floss or a sponge, and only put a fresh bag of carbon back in after the treatment is totally done.
After the treatment is done and you've done a final large water change to pull out any remaining medication residue, then you can put the carbon back in.
We've covered prevention, diagnosis, and treatment. But now we have to get to the hardest part of this entire topic. We need to confront the reality of what to do when treatment is failing and how to assess a fish's welfare.
This is the reality of being a responsible animal keeper, and it's a conversation that needs a lot of empathy and a lot of clarity.
Because sometimes the fish doesn't respond.
There are times when it doesn't. Maybe the diagnosis was too late. Maybe it was a really virulent pathogen like advanced dropsy or columnaris. Or maybe the fish just had pre-existing conditions that were too much to overcome.
And at a certain point, prolonging treatment is just prolonging suffering.
It is. We often feel like we've failed our animals when we reach this point, but a shift in focus is absolutely necessary. The question becomes, when do we step away from trying to cure and move entirely toward compassion?
What are the signs? What are the key indicators that tell us a fish is suffering unnecessarily?
We need to look for persistent signs that show the quality of life has just deteriorated beyond any reasonable hope of recovery.
Like what?
The clearest ones are a persistent loss of balance or swimming ability. They can't orient themselves, they're listing heavily, they're struggling to stay upright for long periods.
Labored breathing that doesn't get better?
Right. Even after you've increased aeration and the water is perfect, if that labored breathing continues, that's a major indicator of severe internal damage.
And the most basic need of all, food.
Absolutely. A persistent total refusal to eat over an extended period, say 5 to 7 days or more, leading to severe wasting, that means the body is shutting down.
So if you've run a full, appropriate course of treatment and you see no improvement in those areas,
Then the ethical focus has to shift. Continuing to try expensive, stressful treatments when the fish is showing zero response often just increases their pain and their stress.
that shift from cure to compassion, it's incredibly difficult. But it's arguably the final act of kindness we can offer.
It is the ultimate commitment to that fish welfare first value we talked about. We have to frame the final decision, humane euthanasia, not as a failure of the hobbyist, but as a last resort welfare decision.
It's active compassion.
It's an act of compassion. It provides a quick, intentional, and definitive end to pain when all other medical options are gone. It's a moment of deep sadness, of course, but it is also the most ethical choice available when suffering is inevitable.
But prioritizing their comfort, even in death, you're honoring the animal.
You are. It is the final and highest honor of responsible fish keeping.
We have covered a tremendous amount of ground today, from those sneaky initial stress triggers all the way to the absolute hardest decisions we have to make as keepers.
We have.
And if there's one common thread running through all of it, it's that stability is the cure and prevention is king.
That is the key takeaway. If we could distill everything down, the core actions are these. Focus ruthlessly on environmental stability first. That's your best defense.
And if you see white spots,
If you suspect itch, follow that detailed heat and frequent water change protocol immediately. Treat the whole system. For other diseases, fin rot, fungus, columnaris, isolate the affected fish in a simple hospital tank, protect your main system, and apply targeted medication.
and always, always prioritize the fish's welfare. Use observation as your first form of medicine.
Absolutely.
And remember, if you need help mapping out that stability plan, especially with the confusing initial nitrogen cycle, the Cycling Coach tool is there to guide you. All the resources we mentioned, guides on filtration, maintenance routines, the articles on specific diseases, they're all at tankguide.com/blogs.
And of course, the Stocking Advisor tool is designed to help you plan that balanced, low-stress community before a problem ever starts.
So what's our final thought for people to take away from all this?
The best, most powerful defense against disease is not found in a bottle of medication. It's found in a deep, consistent understanding of your water chemistry, coupled with attentive observation of your fish's subtle behavior. Stability is the greatest cure, and knowing your fish when they're healthy is what allows you to spot trouble before it becomes deadly.
We really hope this information helps you feel more confident and prepared the next time you run into a problem. If this helped you move from panic to a plan, please take a moment to follow Tank Guide Life on your podcast platform right now.
And please, if you know someone who is struggling with white spots or tank instability, share this discussion with them. And leaving a rating, preferably 5 stars, it really helps the show reach other hobbyists who are dealing with sick fish.
You can find us on all major podcast platforms. Until next time, keep those parameters stable.